Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with acclaimed New York City Trumpeter and the Director of Jazz Studies and Chair of Instrumental Studies at Temple University Terell Stafford. We discuss his exciting upcoming one-night-only classical jazz concert April 16th at Jazz at Lincoln Center with Orchestral Premieres by Billy Childs and Bill Cunliffe. Hailed as one of today's leading jazz student ensembles, Temple University Jazz Band will be joined on stage by its sister groups, as well as its Faculty Sextet: Terell Stafford, Dick Oatts, Bruce Barth, Tim Warfield, Mike Boone, and the great Justin Faulkner. We cover the show, the return to live music in our post-COVID world, connections to Bobby Watson in Kansas City, along with so much more from his very interesting and rich world. Enjoy this interview.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Hey, man. It's an honor and a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for taking a minute out for the program.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
So I've seen you on the radar quite a bit in KC. You got good memories here?
I do, man. I do. My mentor is living there now, so he gave me my first break in New York, and if he calls me and needs me there, I'm there for him in a second. Bobby Watson.
The immeasurable good and futures that he has created in this town that's gone all around the world is amazing. I saw the homecoming of Herman Mehari at the Folly a couple weeks ago, which was one of his proteges, and that was one of the best feelings I've ever had at a live show. All these cats that had played with him saw him move on to Paris, saw him come back. It was just, and I couldn't get it out of my head how much and how many times Bobby has done that for so many people around the world to play jazz.
It's amazing, man. It's really amazing.
Well, and speaking of amazing, you have an amazing event that's coming up, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that and what's going on. So let's head into that. What you're doing is quite magnanimous.
Yes, it's a dream come true. Years and years ago, when I was a classical major and working on my degrees in classical trumpet, having no idea that I ever played jazz, and then once I started to play jazz and started to travel, always trying to figure out how I could bring the two worlds together since I spent so much time in them. And so now it's just a way to do so, and it's just the opportunities that are allotted to myself and the students are amazing.
And it seems to me that something like this is there's a part of it where we're coming out of this pandemic. We were tied down for so long. I mean, when I look at the calendar right now and I see March, there's PTSD because that's when everything melted away 3 years ago. Is there a part of this project that is a triumphant return to the world saying, look, live music is back. This is it. We're going in.
I think that's part of it. The funny thing in Philadelphia is, at least at Temple University, when the pandemic hit, as the world shut down for March and April, and we were all in shock through the summer thinking it would just be a month that we'd be out, When the fall came, we came back at Temple and met in person through the whole pandemic. We were socially distant and we still played, the large ensembles or split into smaller ensembles, but we were still together. And we recorded, CDs over the pandemic, sending out boxes to make it happen. So, we worked really hard to stay together, but we couldn't come together as a large group like we have now. So this is a celebration for this particular configuration of the group to finally be able to come together in a space. It's our first time back at the studio orchestra with the Orchestra and Jazz Band. And, it's this commission that has been written by Billy Childs and Bill Cunliffe. It's just been extraordinary.
So the big night is April 16th, and I always hear when anybody has a big outfit, how many moving parts go into it that the crowd and the public don't realize. Talk to me a little bit about, from inception going to April 16th, how do you get this many people with so many moving parts, with such a magnanimous scope, to get that all to come together? How much work does that take on a regular basis to get to that point?
Well, it's really unbelievable. I mean, first of all, finding a writer that will write for this size ensemble is the first thing. And before the pandemic, we wanted to work with Billy Childs, but the pandemic hit, and we knew we couldn't bring this ensemble together. And then, when it looked like we'd be able to start to meet in person again, Billy started to work on this piece called Labyrinth. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful piece. I mean, odd meters everywhere, but, so we've been preparing for that and working with him, making some changes, getting some updates on instrumentation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's been great. So, I work with the big band separately, and our maestro, Jose Luis Dominguez, works with the orchestra. And then we had a reading a couple weeks ago, and then I'm back to school in a couple weeks. And then we start rehearsing for our first concert at the Kimmel Center. And then on April 16th, we're going to premiere this Billy Childs piece, but also Bill Cunliffe wrote a piece as well, because the dean was like, we have a faculty sextet that includes myself, Tim Warfield, Bruce Barth, Justin Faulkner, Mike Breen, and Dick Oatts. And Dick Oatts and I are going to be performing on the Billy Childs piece as soloists with the orchestra and big band. But the Faculty Sextet on April 16th are going to be performing a record we just released entitled Fly with the Wind, a tribute to Philadelphia and its artists. And we're going to perform Fly with the Wind the night of April 16th, which was a composition written by McCoy Tyner. And then the dean was like, hey, since the Faculty Sextet is there, why don't we do commission a piece for orchestra, jazz band, and Faculty Sextet? So Bill Cunliffe's like, yeah, I'd love to do that. So he's written this massive piece entitled Rainforest, which is just beautiful. And then we're going to do the Faculty Sextet will perform this piece with the orchestra and big band.
So the one thing that you were mentioning too during the pandemic about meeting and all of that, I remember when this happened, there was a fear that a lot of students and a lot of people in the world of jazz wouldn't be able to make enough money and would move on. But it seems to me, from where I'm coming from this side of the microphone, that jazz in 2023 in America is stronger than ever. Not only did these students stay around, there's a strength and vitality. So as a veteran in the world of jazz and an educator, what are you seeing?
Oh, I'm definitely, I'm seeing arts presenters that had 2 years of no presenting, and I'm seeing listeners that had 2 to 3 years of no live performance saying, wow, it's unbelievable what we've missed. We've taken it for granted, all these years. And so now I see this resurgence of just listeners wanting to hear the music and performers getting out and wanting to play. For example, right now I'm in Sarasota, Florida. I'm artistic director. This is my first season as artistic director for the Sarasota Jazz Festival. And, so I booked the festival for this year, and now I'm at the festival. Last night was opening night. And my jaw hit the ground when I walked into the venue for the opening act, which was Christian Sands. And the room was just packed, and they're anticipating tonight it just being even more packed through the weekend. And so the folks down here are just so celebratory because they're like, wow, we're filling this venue. Sarasota was thinking that they wouldn't be able to make it past the pandemic because they had a festival last year that didn't do so well. But this year, people are coming out in droves, and it's unbelievable.
I think it just plays into that whole idea of music being a healer. I remember back in the day when Dizzy would go with the United Nations, and they would be in war-torn areas, and they would stop fighting for that day. There's almost a level of that, that's happening now where people are like, this kind of thing's amazing. Because I'm feeling that as somebody that goes to these shows. Like that Herman show, what was going on in there was a level of energy that was off the charts.
That's amazing.
I got a quick Bobby story for you, and this plays into what you were talking about. So Bobby was doing shows. We had this thing called FlexPod, and they were outdoor shows, and it was distanced, and you'd flip the hatch on your car. And I remember at one point I had a Downbeat shirt on, and I was walking to the concession, and some dude that looked like he should have gone to a Kenny Chesney show stopped me and kind of said, what's Downbeat? And I thought he was joking with me, And I was like, it's kind of the Jazz Bible. It's the magazine. And we start talking, and his daughter's there. Over the pandemic, he was listening to a show coming out of Kansas, a jazz show. Never listened to jazz. got hooked, and they came to a Bobby show. Those kinds of things, I think we all kind of reverted back to this auditory place and finding comfort. And jazz was a comfort for people during that time.
Mm-hmm. It was. It really was. Right when the pandemic happened, and we were all so just shocked. I remember Lorraine Gordon from the Village Vanguard called, and she says, I need you to do me a favor. And I said, what's that? She goes, will you do a live stream here at the Vanguard? And we want to start live streams in July, and we're not sure how it's going to go. We think we have some camera guys. We think we have the technology, but we just have to make music. And I said, absolutely. And it was the most daunting thing to drive into Manhattan. All the years I've been driving into Manhattan from Jersey, to drive into Manhattan and the tunnel be completely empty. And I'm able to find parking anywhere in the city. And the restaurants were closed, but the Village Vanguard was open. And for the 2 nights that we played, I've never received so many, emails of thanks and appreciation in my whole career from those 2 nights in July.
Wow. Well, I can tell you from this side of things, to hear that, the stories of exuberance in these shows, it's amazing. I remember, I believe Linton was on 60 Minutes shortly after this happened, and they were grieving the loss in their family, and they were kind of trying to figure out what they were going to do and how everything was going to come together. So it is really good to see all of these albums coming out and the way that people process the pandemic through music, and the fact that we're all here and we're talking about it and we walk through it, and, it's just, I think that's kind of been the testament of jazz from the word go. It's always been a music that's pulled people together. There's been very deep roots, and it's always grown no matter what's happened.
Absolutely.
I kind of want to get to a little bit to your essence of who you are as a musician. I've always played you on the show and been fascinated with how you evolve, and you always stay connected not only to the past, but to the present. And I'm wondering, in this daily walk that you go through as an educator and a recording artist and a live performer, what do you like the best about this process? What gets you up in the morning and moves you through a day?
Well, a lot of things do. And before I forget, thank you for playing my music on your show. But I think it's hand in hand. I'm a practicer, so regardless of what happens in my life, I'm going to wake up every day and I'm going to practice. I just love it. I love my instrument. I love the sound of it. I love the feel of it. I love the mechanics behind it. I love it all. The science of the trumpet has fascinated me, and air has fascinated me. Breathing, I'm fascinated by it all. And then I love, from some of the great teachers I've had when it comes to trumpet, and the great teachers I've had when it comes to jazz. When I see young people struggling with things that I struggled with, or not struggling with things that I struggle with other things, finding ways to share what my struggles were, but also finding ways to meet them where they are and to help them proceed from where they are in their lives, which is great for me. And then after doing so, and after teaching these really talented students, it motivates me, as they say, practice what you preach. Then I want to go back and make sure I am, working on things that, I asked them to work on. And I am working on things that I go back in my lesson books that I'd always keep journals from my lessons and go back and review some of those journals. And I'll go into a lesson with my students now and say, hey, I was reading through my notes, and, here's something to think about. Here's a great exercise that was shown to me years ago by Lou Soloff. And I said, let me show you this exercise. This could help you where you are now. So, it's very cyclical. My teaching goes hand in hand with my playing. And then, if I'm out on the road, when I'm playing with an artist, last night at the opening of this festival, I played with the young pianist Christian Sands and his trio. And, it was so refreshing to step on stage and to play with just like a trio that was just, they played as one. It was 3 as 1. And it was amazing as a guest to come up and sit and play with them. It was almost like sitting on a luxurious couch that you've sat in before, but it's actually your first time sitting on the couch. It just felt so good, and it felt so at home, and it felt just so touching, and there was just so much spirit and soul behind it. So, experiences like that, I want to bring back to my students and say, hey, wow, I played with this trio, and, things went whatever direction I wanted them to go, and sometimes I went in directions they wanted me to go. And I said, that's what it's about. And what we have to do as artists is prepare for those moments, not prepare to be a star or to prepare for a successful quote unquote career, but prepare to be a musician that's flexible, that can move and can dance with the other people in the group and just make beautiful music.
So take me back. It's going to come, back to Bobby here. Mm-hmm. Tell me about how that opportunity came up. Was the opportunity he gave you and how that relationship and appreciation has grown over the years?
So I was working on completing my master's degree in classical trumpet, and I'd spoken to I was asking everybody, I want to learn how to play jazz. It's a long story. I met principal trumpeter of the Chicago Symphony, and he suggested I become well-rounded. He said it's great to play classical music, but learn everything, because you just don't know what life is going to throw you. So I started to learn jazz, and I happened to be at a jam session, and I was kind of studying for my comprehensive exams to graduate from my degree program. And at this jam session, this guy gets up on stage and plays a solo that was just absolutely astounding. I was like, oh my gosh, it's incredible. So after he played, I played, and then I went over to him and introduced myself, and he says, hey man, I like the way you play, and I really, like you as a person. You seem really honest and really genuine. And so I thanked him, and he says, I'm playing with this pianist, McCoy Tyner, around the corner at a club called Blues Alley. Why don't you be my guest and come tomorrow? So I came out to the club. I met McCoy Tyner and his trio and heard Bobby and McCoy play, and just changed my life in so many ways. McCoy was just so cool to me, being like this person I'd read about and listening to records, and like I'm actually talking to McCoy Tyner. And then Bobby, of course, was super warm. And then Bobby said, hey, next week, come to New York and play some of my music. I may have a gig for you. And I did, and he hired me for this gig, and the gig went terrible. And then a few weeks later after the gig, he says, hey, my trumpet player, Melt Mustafa, is leaving to go back with Count Basie. Would you join my group? I have a tour of the West Coast. And that's how it all began. And I got on this tour, and, there were some songs that we played that I could kind of hear my way through, but there were some songs that we played, I just didn't understand them. So I would ask Bobby, hey, what do you play over this? And how do you think about this? And the other guys in the group, I'd ask them questions, and they were so open to answer my questions. And that's how it began with Bobby. And he took me all around the world, and he introduced me to the world of jazz. And through him, I met everyone else, from Jimmy Heath to Benny Golson to Wynton, to the list goes on and on and on.
So, one of the big seminal moments in our lives is that very first show that we see. What was your first live jazz show that blew you away, that either made you want to become a musician or just showed you the power of jazz music?
I was living in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, and this was a little bit before I met Bobby, but my dad bought me tickets. We're living in Downingtown, and the town next door to it was Westchester, and there's a university there, Westchester University. And my dad got me tickets because he heard this guy by the name of John Faddis was coming to town. And John is, of course, trumpet player. I'm a trumpet player, and he took me to see the show. And John Faddis plays notes on the trumpet that I didn't even know existed. I was just like, oh my God! I started to talk to my trumpet. I was like, why don't you do this for me? You give him all these extra notes, give me some of these notes. But it was astounding to listen to John Faddis play, and I came up and. I didn't, at the time I was super, super shy, so I don't even know if I said much to John at the time, but I was totally blown away, and I was incredibly inspired, his control of the instrument, his memory for history, like he was recalling all this historical information about every piece that he played, and I thought that was pretty remarkable. So that really blew me away. And then as a trumpet player, just hearing a trumpet played on that level was really, really mind-blowing.
So of all of the musicians that are out right now, you've obviously played with what we would all consider legends and luminaries in the craft, and you've been around quite a bit. Who's on your radar right now? Who would you love to see in the world of modern jazz live that you haven't caught live yet?
That's a great question. Well, I know I would love to see Esperanza live. I haven't heard her live, and her music really is inspiring. That's a really good question. I'm not sure if I've seen a good amount of people, and I can't think about who I haven't seen live. But I know there's some just young folks that have really, really touched me in a lot of ways, like Ambrose Akinmazuri, Theo Coker, so many, Keon Harrow. There's so many great artists that I don't get to see on a regular basis, but I'm just so proud that they're just taking the legacy of trumpet and the legacy of creation and improvisation to a whole new level. And I'd love to see them and hear their recordings, but some of the ones I named, I would love to get to some of their shows and see them and support them as well. Maurice Hill.
I've always heard that Cecile McLaurin Savant is amazing. Have you seen her live?
I have. She's amazing. She's amazing. Samara Joy is really amazing. Last night at the festival, I heard Liz Wright, who's amazing. Thank God I've gotten to see a good amount of the artists, especially at some of the festivals, and if it's really funny, the Jazz Cruise, man, it's unbelievable how many artists you go on the Jazz Cruise and you get to hear everyone from everywhere and hang out with them and meet folks that you normally don't get to see.
And it's amazing just you saying that, the fact that that's back. Like I am still in that world of being grateful that the festivals and all of these things, and you cats are talking about it because it was just gone for way too long. So it's wonderful. Yeah. And Terell, I really appreciate you taking time out. And before we get out of this proverbial digital door here, I want to make sure that you tell me anything about this one night only April 16th show, how anybody can get involved, anything related to it. I would appreciate it.
Yeah, April 16th, Rose Hall. I think it's a 7:30 concert, maybe 8 o'clock concert. But, here, I look at it this way, for those people who want to come out and support the future of jazz, then there are plenty of students on stage to support, no matter what genre you prefer, because the orchestra will be there, the jazz band will be there. And then if, in addition to hearing a great, orchestra who will perform a piece, and of course Billy Childs wrote a piece and Bill Cunliffe wrote a piece, one of the students in the jazz band, a gentleman by the name of Banks Sapnard, wrote a piece for the jazz band, his very first piece, which is great. We're gonna perform that as well. So it's going to be a night filled with music. There's going to be a couple of the pieces are Latin inspired, which is really, really great. Other pieces are more modern. So it's just a night of beautiful music made by beautiful people for a beautiful cause. Just to have give the students an opportunity to play this music in New York. It's huge for them. They're so excited. They're like, oh my gosh, we get to play at Rose Hall, So this is a huge thing for the students, huge things for our community, and hopefully a huge thing for the listeners.
Terell, man, this has been wonderful. Thank you for taking time out. Best of luck with everything. Have a great night on April 16th, and we look forward to you coming back to KC for sure.
Thanks so much. Hope to see you when I come back.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in Philadelphia, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Terell for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, you can find Neon Jazz Archives at Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.